Brendan Woods, Public Defender, Alameda County. In December 2012, with 20 years of experience in criminal defense litigation, Attorney Brendan Woods was appointed the first African-American public defender in Alameda County history. Brendan leads 160 attorneys, investigators, and support staff to provide superior legal defense of more than 3,300 new files monthly. In 2013, his office was named Law Office of the Year by the Alameda County Bar Association. He is the president of the California Public Defenders Association, and in 2016 was honored by the Harvard Law School for outstanding public service, and is considered an expert on many subjects associated with public defense. He established a clean slate program to expunge clients' criminal records. Woods also hired immigration attorneys, making his office the first in the country, outside of New York, to implement immigration representation within the Public Defender's Office. Brendan has also developed a youth Know Your Rights program called LYRIC, Learn Your Rights in California, aimed at empowering high school students by teaching them how to safely assert their constitutional rights. Without further delay, let's receive Attorney Brendan Woods.
So, I'm a public defender, and I think I've been defending in some way, shape, or form even before I became an attorney. And before I get started, I want to make sure that we're all clear on exactly what a public defender does. So, I represent people when they are charged and accused of a crime, when they cannot afford an attorney. You hear the Miranda rights, if you blah, 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 if it's want to be appointed to you. My office, we are those attorneys. So what that means is we represent people accused of crimes, meaning driving on a suspended license, to petty theft, to DUI, to domestic violence, to rape, to murder. We do it all. Okay? I've seen it all. And I'll tell you this, I absolutely love my job. I love what I do. I wake up at 8:30, I go to work, I love it. So I wake up, I get to work at 8:30. Get to work at 8:30. Make sure we're recording. I get to work at 8:30. I leave at around 7, I get home, do kid time, I turn on Sports Center, and I start working again. I love it, I can't get enough. You could say that I'm a subject matter expert. So hopefully during the time I have here with you today, I will share with you some of my knowledge, tell you about why I do this work, give you some historical context, tell you what I've seen, and hopefully by the end, you will recognize that racial injustice exists, and it is incumbent on all of us to recognize that it exists, own it, and do what we can to fix it. So, I've been a PD for over 22 years now. I started when I was 10, right? Yeah? Okay. I'm the public defender for Alameda County. Alameda County Public Defender's Office is one of the oldest offices in the nation. It was formed in 1927 by Chief Justice Earl Warren. He used to be a DA in our county, and he recognized the need for a public defense and started our office. So there have been 8 public defenders before me. I am the 9th. I am the first African American, the first person of color to hold this position in Alameda County. So I say that often, it's claps, like, oh, yeah, great, Mr. Woods, awesome. But that is shameful. That it wasn't until 2012 that a black person held this position in Alameda County, Berkeley, Emeryville, Oakland, home of the Black Panthers. Now I'm going to blow your mind even more. Right now, I am the only appointed chief public defender in the state of California. Right. So when you talk about racial injustice, that's it right there. I am the only black person in the state who's leading a public defender's office when the majority of the clients look like me. So we have a lot of work to do. I would be lying to you, and I'm in church, so I can't lie, if I told you that race was not a motivating factor in regards to why I do this job. Race has played a significant impact in almost every decision I have made in my life. I went to law school to be a public defender. I went to law school to fight against racism in our courts. I went to law school to fight against the way the system treats people of color. So, I don't really believe I have any choice except to be a public defender. And that clock is going really fast. I think you guys sped it up for me, didn't you? Man, all right. This is the worst kind of conference for time. You have pastors and lawyers speaking. You are going to go way over, okay? You're going to be here till 8 o'clock, I'm telling you. So I'm in church. I thought it'd be fitting if I give a little testimonial. Now, I got to this work about what I saw growing up, what I saw happening in my community, what I saw happening to my family. And part of it, how myself personally, how I was treated by law enforcement. So I'm not going to go through my whole life story because the clock is ticking. But I'm just going to tell you something. It's funny hearing you, Chief. We have some similarities in growing up. And besides being bald, we have more than that. I'm not quite as built as you, but I'm going to work on that. I'm from New York. I was born back east. My family immigrated from Jamaica. But my mom was a single parent. My biological father, not dad, last time I saw him I was 8. His path, which you could say, was selling drugs, beating women, selling women. That was his thing. And because of that, I was more so raised by my mom and my uncles. One of the uncles that raised me when I was a sophomore in college got sentenced to prison for 27 years for armed bank robbery. So from sophomore until a few years ago, someone who raised me missed that whole part of my life. Another cousin was severely beaten by the police in New York. His life changed dramatically after that. Began to commit crimes, had a traumatic brain injury. He just got off federal parole a couple years ago. Another cousin, when he was a freshman in college, had the early onset of some mental health issues. He began to self-medicate with marijuana, onto meth, crack, began to commit crimes. About 6 months after I became appointed public defender, they found his body in the pier in San Francisco, where had been under the water for about 30 days. So when it comes to this criminal justice system, I've seen how it's impacted my family directly. And as I am honored and privileged enough to work for my clients and to lead my office, I get to set a vision and direction. And everyone I employ, and I mean everyone, if you come work for me, you don't treat our clients as if they're defendants or inmates or case numbers. You treat them as if they're your family, your brother, your uncle, your cousin. I'm going to cut some stuff, I really am. So, when it comes to my own personal interaction with law enforcement, just tell you this really briefly. My first real contact, came when I got my license. Okay. Now, things have changed now. There wasn't an Uber or Lyft. When you were 16 and you got your license, it was a big deal. It was like freedom. Like, I can drive. I can go anywhere. As long as I was home by 10. But it was freedom. And at the same time, with that freedom came this terrible feeling of oppression and discrimination by those that were supposed to be protecting you. Between the age of 17 and 21, I was stopped by the cops 15 times. I'll tell you quickly a story when I was driving back from Santa Barbara to UCLA, the quick version. I was in college, I was a sophomore. My friend's car had broken down, 3 friends. It was a Sunday. I drove up to pick them up in King City, was driving them to UCLA. Their car broke down, and yes, I was speeding. I had an old black Nissan Sentra. The speedometer went to 85, and it was pegged, okay? Yes, I was speeding. I got stopped at around 11:30 at night in Ventura. Okay. Got stopped, 1 cop car arrived, then another one, and I got pulled out. But on the side of the road, I was sitting there, then I started questioning my friends in the car. They're all white. You guys okay? Are you safe? Where was he taking you? I'm in college, right? So as I sat there and eventually got my ticket and was let go, I remember driving down to UCLA, dropping off my friends going, I'm never, ever going to be in that position again. I'm never going to be in a position where I get stopped and I feel completely powerless. And I have no idea what I should do, what I should say, or how to protect myself. I knew in that moment that I was going to do this job and be a public defender. If I got through 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, 3 years of law school, I was going to do this work and fight against racism in the courts, fight to protect people who look like me, and fight against mass incarceration. That's what I was going to do. And when we think about this system that we're talking about, this criminal justice system, what we are doing is we're taking human beings. We're taking human beings and placing them in cages in the name of public safety. This justice system is in the business of human caging. Back a long time ago in my career, early on, I had cases and I went to court. I was talking to a client, and he said back to me, if you put me in a cage, I'm going to act like an animal. I do a lot of talks, and one of the things I heard from a community advocate, and I love this saying, hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. So we as a society have got to re-envision how we do criminal quote-unquote justice. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of homework because I can't talk about everything I have here. If you can, and you want to get more into this issue and learn, there are 3 things, 3 forms of art, I'll call them, that you have to read or watch. Number 1, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. 2, Brian Stevenson, Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy, and please watch Ava DuVernay's film, The 13th. They discuss and put a good historical context on how we got from slavery to the black codes, to Jim Crow, to mass incarceration. I'm going to read this quote to you because I have to. It's from a Supreme Court case, and when you hear this, it's shocking that we as a nation did this or allowed this to happen. It was regards to whether African Americans had civil rights or whether the Bill of Rights applied to us. The Supreme Court justice in this country said the black man has no rights that the white man was bound to respect. That was the law in this country. That was the law. And then we see how at some point in time slavery was abolished. Yes, that was great. The 13th Amendment came, okay? But slavery was still replaced with forms of oppression and control. The most obvious one that took place was a system of lynching that was just designed to keep black people under control. And it wasn't legal, but it was still enforced and sanctioned by those in authority. 1916, Jeff Brown was lynched for accidentally bumping into a white girl as he ran to catch the train. 1919, William Little, a soldier returning from war, was lynched for refusing to take off his army uniform. 1940, Jesse Thornton was lynched for referring to a white police officer by his name without the title of Mr. Read the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except. As a lawyer, anytime you see except, you're like, something bad's coming. Except as punishment for a crime. So slavery isn't illegal. It's completely legal if you're in prison or jail. So there's that thought, is our criminal justice system broken? Or is it doing exactly what it was designed to do? All right. Man, it's this clock. All right, I'm going to keep going. You guys can hang out for a little bit. So I remember my first day in the job as a public defender. When I first started as an interviewing attorney, my job was to go over to jail and do intake and talk to clients. And I remember my first day going to North County Jail in Oakland and walking into the holding cell where they kept everyone together. And it was just a sea of black faces. And you hear about the system. You know, you want to go into it and fight it. You know it's bad, but when you actually see it, it is absolutely devastating. And then we have to break down how it occurs. Where does it start? And the whole system, actually, as a system, if it's designed to do what it's doing, it's working beautifully and it feeds itself extremely well. But what we have to talk about first is the entry point, okay? The entry point. I'm so glad we had education here. I'm so glad the chief of police here. That's where we get going. And entry point from my mind, where we see it the most as a public defender, is in policing. That's the first interaction. So I'm going to pick on my jurisdiction in Oakland and just tell you some stats with regards to them and policing. OPD, Oakland Police Department, was surveyed recently. There was a study done in 2016. 60% of their stops were of African Americans, who make up 28% of Oakland's population. In the 13-month period of the study, only 20% of officers stopped a white person, while 96% of the officers stopped a black person. Only 26% of officers handcuffed a white person, while 72% handcuffed an African-American person. And this did not include arrest. Only 23% of officers conducted the search of a white person, while 65% conducted a search of an African-American person. 1 in 3 African-Americans, as compared to 1 in 10 whites, were stopped. Would have stopped that did not lead to an arrest or a citation. So right there is where we see it at its initial outset. And it's this historical context that the chief says. There are these implicit biases that exist, and we need police departments and police chiefs who are cutting edge and who are willing to step into it and try to fix it. So once you're arrested, we get into the next system, which is bail, right? And you think about it as a concept, bail, either you get cited out by a police officer or you go to court. And if you can afford to pay, you can be released. Guess who cannot afford to pay and get released? Low-income people of color who remain in the system. And then you see how it keeps going. Okay. If you bail out, you have money, you get a better deal. Your case might get dismissed. You can fight your case. If you were in custody, you end up taking a deal to get out of jail. Then guess what happens? You're now on probation, right? You have a conviction. You lose your job, housing, benefits. It's the cycle that feeds itself. Quickly, how many people in his room think that innocent people plead guilty? Oh, good. I like that. How many people in here think that if you were innocent, you would never plead guilty? If you were innocent, you'd never plead guilty. I love this question. I love this question. It makes you think. So, imagine this. You are accused of a crime. It's a really bad crime. If you go to trial and lose, let's say you can get 50 years in prison. So the chances of you getting out alive are pretty slim. It's a weak case. It's a defensible case. You might be able to win. The DA makes your defense attorney an offer. Says, you know, if you take a plea bargain, give you 7 years state prison. What do you do? Do you risk it? Do you take that gamble? Do you take that chance? I don't. And you know why? I've got 2 baby girls. I've got 2 daughters. I want to see them get married. I want to walk them the aisle. I want to kiss my grandkids. So I take that deal. And that happens every single day in this criminal, quote-unquote, justice system. When we talk about innocent until proven guilty, it does not work that way, ladies and gentlemen. It does not work that way. I'm going to jump ahead, and maybe some things will come up in questions later. I want to just conclude by talking about a case that I read in law school called McCleskey versus Kemp. And it was a case where an African-American man in Georgia was convicted of killing a white police officer during a robbery. And he was sentenced to death. The lawyers in Georgia did a bunch of research, and they sought to prove to the court that the way the death penalty was done in Georgia was racist. Okay? They hired just some guy, I believe his name was David Baldus, out of Berkeley, did all these studies. He looked at 2,000 cases with regards to the way punishment was implemented, and they proved it. I mean, beyond a shadow of doubt, they proved it. At this time, in Georgia, the death penalty was assessed and given 22% of the time when a black person killed a white person, and only 3% of the time when a white person killed a black person. In Georgia at the time, prosecutors sought the death penalty 70% of the time. 70% when a black person killed a white person, and only 19% when a white person killed a black person. The Supreme Court, in an opinion, said in that case, apparent disparities in sentencing are an inevitable part of our criminal justice system. Such disparities in sentencing are an inevitable part of our justice system. That was in 1987. That wasn't 1950, 1940. That was 87. I was a junior in high school. What the Supreme Court did is say, justice, the death penalty, is racist. And there's not a darn thing we're going to do about it. So, I think I cut out 3 pages here, but it's okay. Just to conclude, when I was, last night when I finished looking over my notes, I went back to my original yellow pad that I had when Dr. Stewart first talked to me about speaking here. And I don't know where this came from, but I looked at my notes. And I'm not sure if he said it was my interpretation, but I had written down, do give my professional perspective, not personal. Well, that's impossible for me. Because my professional and personal are so intertwined. It's hard to separate. And I think if we're going to address this problem of racial injustice, it has to be personal. It has to be personal to all of us. If it's personal, we'll commit to it. We'll attack it. And we'll try to fix it. It's got to come from here. And I urge you all to make it personal, because if we don't, Black and brown communities will continue to suffer and continue to get hurt. And no one, no matter what your race, color, orientation, will be safer. So please make it personal. Please fight to end racial injustice. Thank you.